Have you ever wondered how long you can go without sleeping at all? 10 days, 20 days, 30 days? Well, in the 1940s the Russians did, and apparently they did a human experiment to explore the possibilities of it. Today we'll be talking about the popular Russian sleep experiment. Stories about it have been passed on from time to time, and there are many versions out there on the internet about it. So get ready, because this is one creepy story that we're going into today. The 1940s was a time synonymous with war. World War II just emerged, and it was a hard time for the Soviet Union. From 1940 to 1950, around 20 million Soviet citizens died. Hitler executed civilians mercilessly and indiscriminately as part of his plan to eradicate Russia from the face of the planet. Additionally, many people suffered and died as a result of Stalin's purges in the gulags. Every nation, including Germany, the United States and England, were looking for ways to win World War II. The pressure was high on the people in the field of medicine and technology to discover something that would make them one step ahead of the war. The Soviet Union? Their strategic weapon would be in the form of the Russian sleep experiment. Before getting into today's video, thank you so much for hanging out and watching with me today. My name is James, and this is the restricted section. We upload 3 times per week. If you enjoy stories like this one, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. If there are any stories you would like to see in future videos, please put them down in the comment section below. During the Soviet era in the 1940s, a group of scientists set out to discover the results of 30 sleepless days and nights. During the time, Soviet researchers believed they had developed a stimulant capable of keeping a soldier awake for an extended period of time. The prisoners were locked in a sealed chamber by Soviet Union researchers. The chamber had everything they needed, including running water, toilet, and a bed, but no bedding. The stimulant gas was continuously administered to the test subjects by the researchers in order to keep them awake. At the same time, they would check to see if the oxygen levels were adequate. For the first 3 days, everything appeared to be fine, and the gas was performing as expected. And for the first 5 days, everything was fine. The subjects had been promised, albeit falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were recorded, and it was discovered that they continued to discuss increasingly traumatic incidents from their past. And the general tone of their conversations became darker after 4 days. On the 4th day, the prisoners began to speak of the horrors they had witnessed during the war, among other increasingly traumatic incidents. Things got much worse on the 5th day, when the prisoners went into psychosis. Aside from talking to themselves, they began to see things that weren't there. They also became paranoid about their fellow prisoners and would frequently whisper about other test subjects on the chamber's microphone. They stopped talking to each other and began whispering into microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Surprisingly, they all seemed to believe that they could gain the experimenters' trust by turning over their comrades, and the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers thought it was a result of the gas itself. On the 9th day, 2 prisoners began screaming and running around. Their screams were so loud that they nearly ruptured their vocal cords. There was complete silence, seemingly out of nowhere. There was no screaming, and the other test subjects had stopped talking. The researchers were terrified of what might happen in the chamber. After 9 days, the first of them began to scream. One man ran the length of the chamber for 3 hours straight, yelling at the top of his lungs. He continued to scream, but could only produce occasional squeaks. According to the researchers, he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising aspect of this behaviour is how the other captives responded, or more accurately, did not react to it. They kept whispering into the microphones until the second captive began to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives dismantled the books, smeared page after page with their own feces, and calmly pasted them over the glass portholes. The screams suddenly stopped, and the whispering into the microphones stopped as well. 3 more days had passed. The researchers checked the microphones hourly to ensure they were working, as they didn't believe no sound could be coming in with 5 people inside. And indeed, the chamber's oxygen consumption indicated that all 5 were still alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen that 5 people would consume during very strenuous exercise. On the 14th day, the researchers did something they had promised not to do in order to obtain a response from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to elicit a response from the captives they were afraid were either injured or dead. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." Despite the eerie silence, the scientists could still hear one of the prisoners say, "We don't want to be free." On the 15th day, the researchers decided to open the chamber, only to be met with a horrific result. One of the inmates had died. The dead prisoner like the other 4 surviving test subjects, were severely mutilated. Under the ribcage, their abdominal organs had been removed. The skin and the majority of the muscles that were attached to the ribs had been torn off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage, even though the heart, lungs, and diaphragm were still in place. The subjects' eviscerated but still living bodies were surrounded by their intact blood vessels and organs, which had simply been removed and laid out on the floor. Each of the 4 could be seen to have an active digestive system that was breaking down food. The fact that they were eating their own flesh they had ripped off and eaten over several days became quickly apparent as they were digesting it. The 4 surviving test subjects all had horrifically violent injuries, some of which appeared to have been self-inflicted. Their bodies had large sections of muscle and skin torn off. The researchers originally believed that the wounds were caused by teeth, but the destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips revealed that this was not the case. Those injuries were inflicted by their own hands. Chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chest were stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, clogging it and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. It was never determined how much of the water on the floor was actually blood. Despite their fatal wounds, desperate attempts to stay awake, and sheer will to live, the test subjects who survived were still extremely strong when they were taken out of the chambers. Additionally, they had an extreme desire for the gas and an unfathomable resistance to sedatives. Attempts to sedate the men resulted in their instant deaths the moment they fell asleep. Out of the 5 test subjects, 2 had already passed away. The other 3 were receiving medical attention for their wounds in order to enter the chamber once more, but the EGG monitor made a startling discovery that every test subject was brain dead. Just before the chamber was sealed, one of the 3 inmates fell asleep and passed away instantly. Another prisoner was shot by the primary Russian sleep experiment scientist. The researcher questioned the final surging test subject before shooting him. He shot the prisoner dead after the prisoner responded, "I'm the evil, kept in check by sleep and resides in every human mind." After that, the researcher went on to erase all evidence of the Soviet sleep experiment. Despite widespread claims to the contrary, the Russian sleep experiment is still regarded as one of the most legendary internet stories ever. But what is the truth behind it? Both offline and online, the story is well discussed and even debated upon whether the story is true. Some people say it is true and others say it isn't. Well, there were so many human experiments done during World War II that the possibility of the Russian sleep experiment happening actually isn't impossible. In fact, the Soviet Union was responsible for a number of top-secret scientific investigations that took place from the early 1900s until the late 1980s, when the Soviet Union finally fell apart. The poison laboratory was one of the most notorious scientific experiments carried out by the Soviet secret services. Ignatiy Kazakov, a professor of medicine, created this top-secret research facility. The facility's main function was to test various poisons that had been created with the intention of attacking the West. The lab is thought to have been reactivated in 1991 and is still being used to produce lethal, poisonous, and biological weapons for covert operations in the West. And there's even another true story very similar to the sleep experiment. Involving human test subjects, specifically political prisoners, the Soviet Union was testing out an experiment to discover a poison that was tasteless and odorless, and that was undetectable even after the victim had passed away. Tested poisons included cyanide, mustard gas, digitoxin, ricin, and curare. The lab was also the location where alleged enemies of Russia were brought to be poisoned to death. Not as spine-chilling and petrifying as the sleep experiment, but still. In December 1963, 17-year-old American Randy Gardner set out to complete a project that would surely win the science fair. He intended to break the previous record for the greatest number of days without sleep. It gained so much attention that Dr. William Dement, a sleep researcher, studied the experiment closely. Dement kept a close eye on Gardner the entire time, monitoring his mental state through a series of cognitive and sensory tests. 2 days into the experiment, Gardner began to have problems with his speech. He was unable to repeat simple tongue twisters, and he also had problems with his sensory ability to identify objects around him. Around the 5th day, he began hallucinating, and he began having difficulty remembering any short-term memories. At the end of the experiment, Gardner stayed awake for 264.4 hours, or nearly 11 days and 25 minutes. This all paid off. Gardner won his science fair, and he was even immortalized in the Guinness Book of World Records. But the bad news? He began having occasional insomnia attacks on a nightly basis by the late 2000s. He later suffered from recurring insomnia for several years before settling into a more consistent routine. Gardner now only gets about 6 hours of sleep per night. This story just shows how bad sleep deprivation is. So does this mean the sleep experiment is somehow true? The truth is, the Russian sleep experiment is merely a horror tale that first surfaced in August of 2010 on a Creepypasta wiki page. The author of the story is someone with the username Orange Soda, but their true identity is still unknown. Even science doesn't support the claims that it was based on a true story. According to an internal medicine physician and medical content expert at Sleeping Ocean, Dr. Po Chang Su, there is no scientific ground proving that gas, or any substance for that matter, can keep a person awake for 30 days. Additionally, the experiment is unlikely because of the effect sleep deprivation has on the brain. You've just heard what happened with Gardner, right? But what started as a creepypasta story became extremely successful in the entertainment industry. It bagged a lasting impression. There are horror books, movies, and even short films written in honor of the Russian sleep experiment. Whether you believe it's true or not, the Russian sleep experiment is considered to be the most popular, most shared internet horror story ever. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and watching today. My name is James, and this is the Restricted section. We upload 3 times per week. If you enjoy stories like this one, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. If there are any topics you would like to see in future videos, please let me know in the comments section down below. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.